Hello dear viewer, today I've got another collection update video for you featuring some of the Blu-rays and 4K Blu-rays that I've been adding to my collection lately. The general gist of these videos are not just for me to show off what I've been adding to my collection, it's for you to hopefully take some of these as recommendations for films to find, perhaps films to enjoy, and add to your own collections. So we start things off with a big one for me. It's the Roaring Twenties from Criterion. This is the UK release and it is a 4K disc, which is great to say because for the longest time we did not get Criterion 4Ks here in the UK. The Roaring Twenties is a fantastic film from director Raoul Walsh, who is one of the best directors of the period. It stars James Cagney and Humphrey Bogart. It's a tale about these three men who knew each other in the war. They come back to the United States as Prohibition is about to come into effect. And it looks at the lives that they lead and the different paths that they go down. And it does not end well, let's just say that. I really was surprised by how good the 4K looked with the Dolby Vision for a film that's from the 1930s, 1939 to be exact, which is known as one of the best years for cinema ever. That's beside the point. The 4K disc looked and sounded great. I still see lots of naysayers out there who say that black and white films don't deserve 4K treatment, or I've seen some people say wacky stuff like films made before the 1970s don't deserve a 4K disc, like that makes any difference. The truth is that old movies like the Roaring Twenties can look fantastic on 4K. Next up, I've got an import from the United States. It's the film Walk Hard, the Dewey Cox Story, starring John C. Reilly in the spoof music biopic that I maintain is one of the best comedies of the 2000s. This film did have a UK Blu-ray way back when it was released in 2008, and it's long out of print. So when I saw that this was getting released, I really wanted to get my hands on it. And it has this really nice steelbook design. And as you may know from watching the channel, I'm not really a collector of steelbooks as such anymore. But I do buy them every now and then because they are special films to me, or because you can't get them without getting the steelbook. I highly recommend this to you if you've not seen it. It's really funny. And this is a great release from Mill Creek in the United States. I think these are a Walmart exclusive over there. So to my American viewers, head over to Walmart and you should be able to find this on the shelves. Another one of these Walmart Mill Creek steelbooks that I got was I Know What You Did Last Summer. A lot of people dismiss this film as some stupid throwaway teenage film. I actually think it has a lot of noir undertones mixed with, of course, the horror influences. And there are some really good sequences in here. It doesn't all hold up. Some of it is quite campy. Some of it has some quite ropey line deliveries. But regardless, it's an iconic film and one that I greatly enjoy watching. Next, I want to talk about something exciting that I got from Germany, from Turbine Media. It's the Flesh Gordon media book. Flesh Gordon being the sex erotic spoof of the old Flash Gordon serials. This came out in the 1970s and it is pretty much what you would imagine. There is some quite graphic sexual content in here amidst some of these colourful science fiction sets. The film is silly with some really good jokes, some great production design including some of the spaceships, and it's just so great to see it get a Blu-ray release in this lovely media book from Turbine. Inside the media book you get the Blu-ray, you get all the booklet text which is in German, so I'm going to need to brush up on my German language. And on the second Blu-ray disc you get sex rays and stop motion and the Super 8 version of Flesh Gordon. I love that stuff like this is getting released these days, and that's why I keep saying we are in a really good time to be a collector of movies. Next up, I kindly got sent two recent releases from Disney on 4K. The first of these is WandaVision, the complete series, which I watched on Disney Plus when it was first released, and I still think that this is the best MCU TV series to date. Some of the others just haven't hit it for me. This one I really liked a lot of the creativity. I had read the Vision comic series that this was actually based on, and I liked how this just explored the form. It explored different ways of telling the story. The 4K looked great, as you would imagine, for a modern release. Looked pretty much how I remember seeing it on Disney Plus. And I've literally just seen the news that Disney is releasing more of their TV series on 4K Blu-ray. They're doing Obi-Wan Kenobi, they're doing the Star Wars Andor series, they're doing Falcon and the Winter Soldier, and they're doing Moon Knight as well. So it's good to see more of this stuff coming to physical media, because for a long time now, these were only Disney Plus exclusives and you couldn't watch them any other way. And while I still wish that Disney could open up those vaults and start releasing some of those films that they've got locked in there, I'm at least glad to see them making some forward steps in physical media releasing. The other Disney 4K disc that I got kindly sent was The Marvels, which I had seen before I got sent this, and to be honest, was not a fan of this film. And this film has been quite negatively received by a lot of people. Quite notably now, I think this is Disney and Marvel's worst performing film at the box office so far. And I feel that quite a lot of the flack that this film has been receiving has been quite unfairly pinned on the director, Nia DaCosta, because as we know, most of these films now are made by lots of people, by a committee essentially, with lots of writers and producers involved. So I think it's quite unfair to pin the failure of such a film on one person. Anyway, I watched the film again and I really wanted to like it more. I really did, but I just think that it fails in a few different areas. I think the central concept of having these three different characters, where when they use their powers, they swap positions with each other. I think that is an interesting idea which was not fully explored in this film. And I think the film really gets bogged down in some of those melodramatic scenes between the characters. So for me, the film just wasn't really doing much for me, and I really wanted to like it more than I did. Moving on, I have a brand new Blu-ray release from here in the UK. It's the film Femme, which has been released by Signature Entertainment. This was a film that I hadn't seen when it was first released, but I'm so glad I did, because this film is fantastic. Femme stars Nathan Stewart Jarrett, who is a drag performer who ends up getting physically assaulted and beaten in the street late at night by the character played by George McKay, who is a very physical, like hard man kind of guy, but deep down he has some things that he is wrestling with. Anyway, sometime later after this assault takes place, it has ruined the life of Jules, who no longer does the drag performing and just is trying to cope with life. He ends up meeting his attacker, Preston, in another situation where Preston does not recognize Jules as the person that he attacked because he doesn't have his makeup and his costume on. When Jules realizes this, he uses this to get closer to Preston to plan his revenge for this attack. So the whole film is based on this dramatic irony, the suspense that we know that Jules is pretending to be someone he's not in order to get revenge on his attacker. The film is incredibly well done, and it's one of the best British films I've seen from the past few years. So if you can get your hands on this Region B disc from Signature, I strongly recommend it. Then I had the pleasure of watching Abel Ferrara's latest movie, Padre Pio, which stars Shia LaBeouf as Padre Pio. For those not too familiar, Padre Pio is a real-life figure, a priest who lived at the start of the 20th century, who experienced stigmata. So he experienced the same wounds that Jesus did when he was crucified. It was also said that he had visions of the future and visions of the life of Jesus Christ himself. So Padre Pio is a very interesting figure in Catholicism, and here we have a movie about him. I've got to admit that Shia LaBeouf is not the first person I would think of to play Padre Pio, but he somehow makes it work. This is a very Abel Ferrara kind of movie, where he is very much wrestling with the theme of faith within the movie, but also experimenting with digital photography, which he has done now for a number of films, which sometimes gives it an inconsistent image. It can be quite jarring when you're watching one scene that looks quite cinematic, and another which looks like it's a handheld shot on an iPhone. It's an acquired taste for sure, but he's a filmmaker that I have a huge respect for. He's been working for decades and decades, and he still makes interesting films. This is one of them. I don't think it's for everyone, but I'm very glad to have got this Blu-ray. Another Blu-ray disc from Dazzler that I just want to give a shout out. This won't be for everyone, but I'll just mention it briefly. It's Father Brown. This is series 11. I don't know if Father Brown is widely distributed outside of the UK, but this is a BBC series based on the Father Brown character from the G.K. Chesterton novels. And the way I would describe this TV series is this is very cozy watching. It's very easy to watch. There are some deadly things going on in this series, but it is largely harmless. So I wanted to give a shout out to this film because I know particularly this is a series that my dad loves, and I sort of dip in and out of Father Brown over the years. But it's great to see that it's still continuing and getting a release on Blu-ray, because there are so many British TV series that do not get Blu-ray releases these days, and that is a damn shame. I also recently watched Ewig. This is from the label Anti-Worlds. This is from director Lucille Hadzihalilovic, and this is a very peculiar film based on the very peculiar novel from Brian Catling about this man who is looking after this young girl whose teeth are made of ice, and every day her teeth melt and he has to reform new teeth for her. And he is looking after this young girl for someone because he receives mysterious phone calls asking how the young girl is. He ends up committing this sort of random act of violence, and he has to take her on a journey with him. And that's about all I'll say here. The film is very atmospheric. One of the most richly atmospheric films that I've watched in a long time. It's not quite a horror film, although there is a lot of chilling imagery here and some scenes of gore as well. And the film is quite slow, verging on what I would call slow cinema with a capital S. It's a film that largely has not been well received, but I think it's a very good film, and I think on future watches it is going to grow and grow on me, because it's like the closest thing I can think of to pure cinema that I have watched recently, where even though this is based on the novel from Catling, I could not imagine experiencing what I experienced with this film in any other medium. So with the Anti-Worlds release, you get this slipcover, and there are special features on the disc as well. And then let me just briefly talk about Shark with Burt Reynolds. This is directed by Samuel Fuller, which I did not realise because I had seen this film mentioned a few times by some different people, and I never knew that it was from the great Samuel Fuller. Now it turns out he did not have complete control on this film. It was sort of re-edited, and I think some things were reshot by the studio. What you might imagine from looking at the cover is that this is like Jaws, but this was made a few years before Jaws, and it is not a Jaws type movie. The story concerns this sunken treasure that is worth a lot of money, and all of these different people who are going to go and dive for it, but it is in shark-infested waters. There is some action underwater with sharks, but most of the film is concerned with Burt Reynolds talking to a lot of different people, and I think the film kind of gets bogged down in some of that sort of stuff. I think the reason this film was not received better by critics and audiences is because they thought they were getting a proper shark movie, and the film is just really not a shark movie like you would get from Jaws. It's great that Signal One are releasing this kind of stuff on Blu-ray. I don't think the original materials are in the best condition, and the film could use some major 4K restoration, but it's one of those films that's probably never going to happen because there just isn't the demand there. So there you go, another big update video from me, just some of the stuff that I've been watching lately. And like I said at the top of the video, you might be able to take some of these as recommendation, but if none of these interest you, then that's absolutely fine as well. Click the video that's on screen right now to watch one of my other recent collection update videos for some more recommendations. Thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you soon.